Thank you for joining me on the MPP Power Hour. I am your host, Massimo Palermo. Today I have with me as my guest, Jeff Weber. Jeff is a former software engineer. He grew up in Massachusetts and is now retired and lives with his wife and mother-in-law in Western Massachusetts. He was an avid reader, mainly sci-fi and fantasy, since grade school. His first novel he wrote took a long time for him to write, nearly 20 years in the making. And he now has two books published. Coincidentally, the books are sci-fi, fantasy genre. Now, I would like to welcome to my show, Jeff Weber. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the MPP Power Hour. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well today. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Jeff, for joining me and part of a community of other guests that I've brought on to the MPP Power Hour of other authors. In fact, you're probably the third person I've spoken with, or maybe even the fourth one at this point, that are fantasy slash sci-fi type of writers at this point. So far, this genre has been good to me as far as being guest on my show. So why don't you tell us about Jeff Weber and your background and how you got started and so on and so forth.
Well, I was always kind of the weird kid who sat in the corner, and I've been reading as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
I looked up my favorite book in grade school was Robinson Crusoe, the original Robinson Crusoe, written in like not quite Old English, but it's really hard to read. The librarian was freaked out that I would read it so much. But been reading forever, got into like the Oz books, Wizard of Oz, and there's a whole series of them. Spent my life reading everything from Tom Clancy, Clive Cussler, but mostly sci-fi and fantasy. Heinlein, well, there's a whole bunch of them. And one day, I think it's either my wife or my mother said, "Hey, you read all this weird stuff. You should write a book." So I started writing back in, actually, I think it was 1993. But it was just, I was working full time, had a family. So I would just write in snatches here and there and sometimes go for years with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I retired, one of my daughters has a bachelor's in English. She's even worse reader than I am, if that's possible. And she also has a master's in library science, so she's a real book aficionado. And she offered to help with the editing and stuff. So we worked on book one and got a tremendous amount done in just a few months. She was in grad school at that time and then was taking a semester off because she was getting burned out. So she had plenty of time to read it and help me with it. And plus, she'd been reading snatches of it since she was little because I'd always ask her how something sounded. So with her help,
Mm-hmm.
got through with about book 1.7. It was more than one, but I noticed that a lot of the things that I buy on, I use like I can't think of the name now, BookBub, and similar types of things. They all seem to be short books that were in series,
Mm-hmm.
and authors would give away the first one or two for free or for very, very inexpensively, and then I would get hooked and end up buying the rest. So that
Okay.
seemed to go. So I found a logical place to cut book one at just about 50,000 words, almost exactly. Packed that up, found a publisher, and sent it off. And it went out okay. Didn't sell anything, of course, but I'm not too good at marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have a lot of money to throw at it. So, but then book two was almost done at that point, so I finished that up over the next few months and shipped that off to the publisher. That came out, by which time I had some ideas. I knew where book three was starting, obviously, and I had a couple ideas about it. So I started working on book three, which has now been off to, I'm using a different publisher this time, and it's almost ready. She said probably August.
Okay.
And my new publisher is going to produce audiobooks for all three as well.
Okay.
The first publisher didn't have they don't do audiobooks. So that languished a little bit. Trying to think what else might be interesting. I'm working on book four at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Coming along fairly well, except that one was a little more off the cuff. I had no real plan at all. I just knew where it started.
And so your first three books, well, obviously you got two done, but you said you were working on a third one, or you sent off the third one to the publisher, you said, right?
Yes.
So of all three, obviously they're the same genre, but are they part of a series?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, it's the names are Enimnori Arrival, Enimnori Discovery, and Enimnori Challenge. It's the
Okay.
same. It's the same person. Well, same people.
Same main characters.
Yeah, it's a series.
Okay, it's a series. And if you were a reader, as a reader, why don't you tell us or describe a little bit about the series, what type, the plot, I don't
Well,
want to say the plot, the storyline, I guess. How would you
right.
describe it?
They are. It's somewhere between It's more like a science fiction where they just happen to use magic.
Mhm.
I heard the term. Somebody told me it was more of magical realism. Not entirely that genre, but very close. Where like I said it's more of a sci-fi story where they use magic once sometimes.
Mhm.
It starts out in California with a person who is he's a martial artist. He's also into, well, in our world, it's the Society for Creative Anachronism. They're the ones who stage like medieval reenactments and actual Jew jousting on horses and have like mock sword fights. It's that kind of thing, as
Mhm.
authentically as possibly can. So he's into those. He's married, has two children, has a degree in engineering. I never specified which one, but but probably electrical.
Okay.
His two children, one is in junior high, one's in high school. Currently is a manager operator of a something like a Radio Shack, although
Okay.
I couldn't say that.
Mhm.
And one day he is delivering some supplies to a high voltage power station during a lightning storm. And he's in the building. All of a sudden the operator says, "What's going on here? They're producing more power than they should." There's a lightning strike and the building explodes. Meanwhile, there's this other world, another universe probably, where there is a young magician. He's very powerful, but kind of very young and untrained. He is like a guard, weatherman, something like that, on a caravan, which is heading to a river to pick up some very valued supplies. Very well, it's caviar again. I don't use the word, but that's what it
Mhm.
is. So he's been hired to watch out for danger and keep the stuff cold. All of a sudden, there's a storm comes up on their end. They're sitting there and they hear, there's a monster coming, and it attacks the camp. Big storm, and he's desperate. What can I do? Plus, the magicians there are not well looked. They're not well regarded, so they're supposed to not reveal how powerful they are or anything like this. They're not quite considered charlatans, but something like that. So they're
Mhm.
trying to power. So he's trying to think of what he can do to help and not get killed. So you think I'll combine a summoning spell with a weather control and try and summon lightning. Well, it actually works. The monster gets killed, but then the next day, the caravan crew finds an unconscious man laying in the gutter next to the road.
Mhm.
Guess who?
I
Uh,
wouldn't guess the engineer, right?
that is correct. His name is
Okay.
Scott. So
What's his name? Sam? Brandon? What's his name?
Scott Hathaway.
Scott.
Yep. The little magician's name is Brandon.
Okay.
And then over the course of the caravan's return to their home city, they learn each other's language somewhat. And oh, I don't know what else just said. There's a political situation which ends up with an attack on a castle, which he helps to defend against, with modern knowledge.
Hmm.
Um,
So Scott goes back in time, right? When
Not
or
real.
a different era,
It's a different universe.
universe. Okay. So he's like, So it's basically in another zone, another universe, but not necessarily time traveling.
Right. Well, one of my people who read it for me and to look at it and said, "Oh, I'll tell my brother he likes time travel stories." So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of reads like, and one of the other reviewers likened it somewhat to a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. If you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So he said it had that kind of feel a little bit.
Right. Yeah, because that's why I said time travel, because it sounds like he's going back to King Arthur time. Right.
Yeah, yes, it's sort of the thing. I like
Yeah.
culture collision type stuff.
Right. Okay. A clash of two worlds or two universes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. So that's interesting. So that's what Scott, right, the main character, is going through in so far in the books, going back and
Yep.
forth, right?
Well, he's back. He's there right now. There's no way to get home.
Okay.
They're discussing it, and so he was thinking at first that just somebody brought me here, they can bring me back, send me back to my family, and
Mm-hmm.
then when he learns the language well enough, they start talking about it. He realizes that it was a freak series of events. A lightning storm there, the power station, a lightning storm here. The guy was in a panic. So it's not reproducible. So he's afraid he'll never get home. And so he kind of goes into a funk for a while, gets drunk, just
I'm
kind of
hope
hangs around like a zombie for days.
I'm sharing my screen. I can see it.
Oh, I see it now. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sharing the screen with you holding your book. Can you tell the audience, is that your first book?
That is the first book. Yes. Where Scott arrives at the home city of this magician is called Enimnori. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I made that up, obviously.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
arrived.
I'm blowing up the picture a little more so people can see the castle.
Yes, I
Uh,
should have. Yeah, it's a this picture of there's a castle, a knight,
mm-hmm.
and it looks
With
like
the
a wizard.
shield.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then a wizard and a guy holding a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the tone of three different, two. Well, the first two coincide, but then he's
Mm-hmm.
different.
Right. Right. So they're kind of clashing culture, kind of sort of clashing culture, clashing universes and
Yep.
whatnot. So.
Different people from different eras and different mindsets, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some content. And he ends up a lot of times trying to explain things, talking about something they don't understand. So he tries to explain some of modern science and things we've learned in terms they will understand. And
Mm-hmm.
a couple of my readers said they really like the sciencey bits. So I try
Okay.
and be as accurate as I have a background in science.
Right.
I try to be as accurate as possible. Sometimes I go off and research things to find
Mm-hmm.
if something works.
Yeah.
Um,
So let me ask this couple questions here. So
yep.
first of all, Scott, is he reminiscent of Jeff Weber being an engineer and having kids and married and
Yes, there's some odd similarities. If you listen to him speak, you'll know his sense of humor is oddly familiar.
okay, especially if
Uh,
someone knows you, Jeff, they'll probably recognize the humor.
I mentioned to one of my oldest, that my daughter that time, I said something like, he's kind of me if my body wasn't so terrible. He says, "Yeah, I'm aware." So
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I kind of like, my character in my book, I kind of copied me to him in a different fashion, but yeah, I get what you're saying. It's you, but him, but with a different body, as you said, so to speak. Yeah,
right,
makes sense.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
sort of like me if I was in my fantasy worlds or something,
right, right. That's what you would be if that was you, if you had a choice. Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. So, so it's you. It's a little bit about reflects you a little bit, right?
Yep.
Um, you said it took you quite a bit of time to do it, and obviously with busy lives. I mean, you started out dabbing into it part time, and now you're retired, and now you're able to sit down and finish up several novels now, right? So
Yeah.
we got there.
Once the first one was done, it felt kind of good.
Yeah, gets a little easier, right?
it does. It's both
Yeah.
easier and harder. It's both really fun and very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you mentioned that earlier about you're not very good at marketing, and you know, honestly, I mean, we're writers. We're not marketing folks, right? And the hard part is marketing. And you know, I was talking to relatives of mine, and they said, "Oh my God, congratulations, you're a writer." You know, blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah. I go, but the work has just begun. You know, just
That was
because
the easy part, sort of.
yeah, there's a lot of work after the fact, after you publish. There's still a lot of work to do as a writer. You know, they always say the best spokespersons for the books are the writers themselves, and that's very true because I think I found myself when I talk to people about my book when they ask me about it and I tell them about it, they get like really interested in it. You know, so that's the hard part is getting people and getting you know people to
Conveying that feeling.
yeah and you know basically getting the word out. That's the hard part, getting the word out.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So anyway, go on. You were saying what else
Oh,
did you want to? Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's too much else I can say without spoilers, but I
Right.
will say at one point I did a lot of research into gunpowder and black powder weapons and their effective ranges and how much damage they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, to try and get as realistic as possible, given the fantasy situation.
Sure. Sure.
So many of my friends think I'm kind of crazy that way, but
Well, there's nothing wrong with being. I mean, I'm not a fantasy sci-fi writer, you know, and that makes sense. I mean, you want to be like when I was writing my book, I wanted to be accurate. Like I was flashing back to the 80s and the 90s, right, in my story, and I wanted to be accurate with the technology that was being used then compared to what we're doing today, right? So I wanted to
right.
be accurate. I didn't want to, you know, and also I quote songs in my book, and I didn't want the wrong era. I didn't want a song from the 1990s
Oh, right.
that was in the era in the 80s. That wouldn't make sense. It would be off track, right? So
Yes.
that was a lot of research, and I don't want to say research because I had the songs in my mind, which ones I wanted to use, but I also or the type of wordage of a certain song because you know a lot of songs have very similar you know
Look.
plots, right? You know,
Yes.
yeah. So I tried to find the ones that best matched that era as well as what I also was thinking at the time as well. So a lot most of my research was that, and you mentioned a little bit. You did a research about black powder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any other kind of research you were doing when you were writing your first book or second book or whatnot?
Well, I did. I had my character talk about like different radio frequencies and such. So I did do some research on what devices produce what frequencies. You know, like where it's what range is a cell phone in versus like the clicker on your car,
Mm-hmm.
microwave, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So I learned a little more about that. At one point, I was worried about like oxygen deprivation when you're climbing a mountain or something like that. So I
Mm-hmm.
looked at levels of oxygen concentration at various heights and their effect on people. Uh, and also, I looked at for a later book. I created some alien races, and I wanted to have their visual spectra slightly different from ours.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up exactly what ours is and what the labeling is for near infrared, far infrared, ultraviolet, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of semi-useless information on that back in my notes, which I found interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think people don't realize little things like you mentioned
Right.
air oxygen. Like the higher elevation you are, the less of it is, and you know, just from my own experience watching sports, they always talked about like football games and Mile High when they went out to Denver. You know, and all of you can see the football players with the oxygen mask because you know because they were just trying to get oxygen in. You know.
Well, I live in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a couple business trips a long time ago in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
higher than Denver, but I don't remember the exact height, like 6,000 to 7,000 feet. And there is a big difference. I got out of my car, picked up my suitcase, walked up 3 steps into the hotel room, and I had to sit and gasp for a while.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
the head, also headaches.
You don't need to climb a mountain in Denver because you're so high up already.
Yeah, you're there. You're almost a mile up, and this place is up in the hill, quite a ways up from there. It's called Evergreen,
Right.
Colorado. I
Uh-huh.
think 7,000 feet plus or minus. And you notice just sitting around watching TV is nothing, but just doing anything. Like I said, walking up the steps into the hotel. And it's like,
yeah. It's like, whoa, where's the oxygen? You need more oxygen. Yeah, yeah. I wonder if they have like all these oxygen tanks like around like vending machines over there in Colorado.
No, once you've been there, they tell me about 3 months, 3, 4 months
To adopt or adapt.
You adapt to that, and you get it. You don't really notice so much anymore.
Got it.
So.
That's interesting because like I've been up like in mountainous areas, like when I've gone back to like in Sicily in Italy, and I've been up in the mountains, but I don't feel the difference only because if you think about it, the mountains over there, Sicily isn't elevated like Denver or Colorado is elevated. And that's yeah, even though we're up in the mountains, it's not as elevated as Denver is or Colorado.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's like I grew up in Berkshire County, and there's like 1,100 feet elevation, whereas 100 feet was Springfield.
Right.
But you don't notice that.
Right. Exactly.
But
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, research is very important, even if it's a fantasy type of
right.
Of a novel. I mean, it's depending on the writer, obviously, I think we're perfectionists, right? Writers are perfectionists, and we want to be accurate when we're writing something, right?
Well, yeah, I've read some stuff where there's something that jars me. It's like, well, that can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even in a Word of Magic, this has to correspond with that, and it doesn't work. That it wouldn't. I don't think would work that way. It's too much of a suspension for me. Just like Samantha Stevens, Bewitched. She was just wiggling her nose and do anything she wants.
Right.
It's a fun story. You're not supposed to think about that at all, but it's
right.
Right.
Right. So I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. I mean, if it's all in fun, then yeah, Samantha can twitch her nose, or Jeannie could cross her arms, or whatever, and makes it happen. But you know what? I mean, it is what it is, right?
Well, it was fun. It's perfectly fun. I enjoyed watching all this stuff, but it's not. I couldn't get my head into it somewhat. Anyway, it was fun, but it wasn't me as far as what.
Right. Oh. I mean, like I said, I mean, when you look back at the Star Wars movies, right? Like the first original from the 70s and the 80s, the first three, compared to the ones that got released in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the technology was so much different, right? So even though the era or the story goes backwards in time, yet the technology is so much better. It's kind of funny that
even in the Star Wars, those are really good, but some of the technical issues are lacking. Like I think they have, they have ships in space banking as they turn.
Mm-hmm.
They don't do that. The banking is because of air pressure. Mm-hmm. So and I think they have one robot standing on the hull of a starship with his cloak flapping in the airless atmosphere. It's like, okay. But although I love those, by the way.
But again, entertainment, right? It's all about entertainment. It's not necessarily about being accurate in this case, or that case. Mm-hmm.
The effects were superb.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I mean, like I said, as writers, we want to be perfect sometimes. Sometimes we can't be. I mean, obviously, if you can go back to what you wrote in your first couple books, would you change anything?
Oh, there's a couple of things, but I set up a situation that I haven't really used yet, which has made things difficult off and on. Mm-hmm. Like I don't remember why I thought of it, but originally, these people on this new planet, they don't have glass. the beaches are not sand, and also there are a couple of moons in close orbit, which make tides really bizarre. Technically predictable, very unpredictable, and much larger than here in most places.
Hmm.
So they don't go on the beach because it's dangerous,
Hmm.
and plus everything loose has been washed away. So I just said that they don't have glass. And there were a couple places in book 2 and 3, plus even in book 1, where I was going to have them like break a glass cylinder, and then I wrote that, and then a while later, oh wait a minute, they don't have glass, so I had to make it waxed paper.
Mm,
Really
okay.
annoying, but
Again, there's that perfectionist in you, right?
yeah, I looked up a little bit about tides and how they work, and
Yeah.
to try and get the moons are small and dense, very very small. So again, I looked up which materials are most dense.
Hmm.
They have osmium, iridium, and gold
Got it.
primarily.
Got it.
So also that has a side effect of any high tech civilization. Those would be very 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 valuable. So it's used for a lot of rare earth material. A lot of high tech electronics uses those things. So and
Okay.
I had a reason for that too.
Okay.
That's into effect in book 3.
Gotcha. So, so I also want to mention that to the audience that Jeff, this is his very first interview, audio or video for that
It,
matter.
it
And he was a little nervous actually when I first was speaking to him about doing it, but here he is. He's holding up pretty well, I think.
Once you start, it's not so
Yeah,
bad. And plus,
yeah.
one time when I was working at General Electric, I was offered the position of teaching a computer course to, in house. And at
Mm-hmm,
first, it absolutely terrified me. Then I figured, well, it'd be good for me, be a learning
mm-hmm,
experience. So I took it.
mm-hmm.
I did that for 2 years, and it was really hard at first. Then I got kind of into it, and it wasn't so bad anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this interview, we're not getting you out of your comfort zone. We are speaking about you and your books, so we are right right in your
From
zone.
backyard, literally.
Yeah, yeah, literally right in your backyard. We're literally talking about your expertise, your books, right? So I think that makes it easy too, because hey, all you're really doing is talking about your books. I mean, you should be an expert in this field.
That I'm pretty good at. It's hard to talk about without giving too much away, though.
Right, right, right. You want to be careful not to give away too much, so that way it keeps people in suspense. And speaking of that, will you let the audience know where they can get your books?
Well, they're available, quote, everywhere books are sold. They're published through was Newman Springs Publishing for the first two, and they put them out on Ingram Services. They're on Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Apple Books, Amazon, of course. But I've
Mm-hmm.
seen them. I've looked them up, and they're available at Walmart. The first notice I saw of them when the first one was published, my wife was poking around the internet, and the first reference we found was a bookstore in Norway.
Oh,
And I know I saw at least one in Australia,
uh,
several in England, but anywhere that carries books, they can order them. They're not
right,
carried in bookstores because they're not very popular.
right,
Yeah, at least.
right,
But they can be ordered almost anywhere you order books. Mostly
right,
I focus on Amazon as far as the marketing goes.
right. Yeah, and honestly, they kind of pretty much leave the book space or the Barnes and Nobles in the shelves and the stores for the more obviously the more like Tom
Yeah.
Clancy's or Stephen King's, because people
Yes.
want to run out and get those. They don't want to wait 2 or 3 days or a week at through Amazon.
Oh yeah. My
So,
daughter, the bookworm daughter, was real into Harry Potter, and
mm-hmm,
she those who'd be waiting at the door at midnight when they were releasing it, and then she'd
mm-hmm,
have it by the end of the weekend.
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
I
I
said,
mean, I don't think I've heard any recent stories or books coming out that people are waiting in line overnight for that.
I haven't heard of any, not to that level, certainly.
Not lately, anyway, right? So
That was a
so yeah,
real
Yeah.
Uh,
So, do you have a website as well?
well, I have a small website. It's on one of those free website builders, jeff-weber.yolasite.com.
Okay.
Yola.
And okay. And what I'll do is I will have all your links on the description of the video when I post it. And I will be posting this on YouTube, and I will be posting on my also on Rumble now. So we are growing as a channel. So you are coming on at a good time when things are growing here pretty quickly and nicely. And for those of you watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and check out Jeff's links. Check out his book, especially if you like fantasy books and what we discussed earlier. Check them out, help them out, and help me out. Subscribe, like, and come back, watch the videos, and keep enjoying because we got more guests coming on the way. So I hope you had a lot of fun today, Jeff, talking with me, and thank you again for coming on to my show today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I probably should mention, I think book 3 will probably be out by the time this airs.
Okay.
But it'll appear on my author page, amazon.com/author/Jeff Weber.
Okay.
They appear on there after a little while, automatically, as long as they're produced.
Yep. Okay.
So,
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Have a good one.
You too. Take care of yourself. Good luck.
Thanks. You too. So, if you are connected on my social media sites, contact me directly to make an appearance on the MPP Power Hour. Hurry while there are still spots available. Don't forget to smack those buttons to subscribe and like my video. Thank you for watching.